Mr. Lincoln's Drummer, Chapter 5. Those first days of March, 100 rumors spread through Camp Griffin. Brigade messengers appeared from time to time, and we were all anxious to learn what our new orders might be. "I joined the Army to fight," Lando complained. "They call us the Army of the Potomac. We might as well be the Army of the Connecticut for all the good we're doing. We've lost more men to sick call than the Rebs would have killed keeping us out of Richmond." Most of us felt the same way. The 3rd Vermont did suffer considerably from different sicknesses, with a third of the whole regiment down at times that winter. Long days of drill and more drill wore us out, and some of the men debated heading home to get the spring crops in. "You can't just desert," I insisted when Russ suggested leaving. "You swore an oath." "Pledged to fight," Russ muttered. "I'll be back before this army moves a dozen miles." What galled us in particular was the news that the Western Army under an Illinois general, Ulysses Grant, had smashed the rebel forts in Tennessee and Kentucky. At Fort Donelson, Grant bagged a whole rebel army, 15,000 soldiers. Now the Westerners were driving south toward Mississippi and Alabama. "Just give us a chance and we'll thrash those Rebs," Lando boasted to Colonel Hyde at dress parade the evening of March 9th.
"You will soon have that opportunity,"
the colonel replied.
"Tomorrow we break camp and march south."
"Hooray!" the men shouted, tossing their caps in the air. We took down our tents, packed our equipment, and prepared for the move that night. Jason Wheeler and I roused the men an hour early that next morning, and Captain Harrington pointed out the wagons in which we would stow our tents, stoves, and heavy equipment. All our clothes and weapons, canteens, and rations went with us on foot. "Willie, you can't mean to pack all that," Cal objected when I began stuffing my belongings in a knapsack. "You must have 50 pounds there," Russ exclaimed. "Add the drum, and there will be more equipment than drummer." "Just take what you have to," Cal advised. He sifted through things, tossing out spare shirts, 10 plates, and the like. "We smuggle the cooking gear into the wagons," Russ told me. "You don't need more clothes than you can wear." "You won't need all those blankets either," Cal observed. "Keep the rubber one and a single good one of wool." "And the rest?" I asked. "We'll stow them in a wagon for now," Cal explained. "We might be able to swap them for a chicken later on." With Cal's help, I whittled down my gear to around 30 pounds. "It's still too heavy," Russ observed. "Toss that spare pair of drawers away, but keep the socks." "Those are good winter woolens," I argued. "From home. The cotton rags the Army provides won't survive a good washing." "Willie, most of the fellows lost those drawers first thing," Cal declared. "You carry 30 pounds on your back a day or so, and you'll learn anything you don't need this hour, this day, is best left behind." They were right, of course, but that didn't make it any easier to stomach. I finally trimmed my gear down to 20 pounds, not counting the drum. Once I was fully dressed, with my knapsack strapped onto my back, haversack on my left hip, and canteen on the right, I realized another ounce or two would have overwhelmed me. "Remember, Johnston," Lieutenant Buck whispered when Wheeler and I took our places at the front of Company D's column, "that drum is vital to the success of this company and the regiment as a whole. See that you're attentive to orders, keep pace with the column, and no matter what, keep that drum at your side." "Yes, sir," I promised. Our move south was a disappointment. We crossed the Potomac, but we went no farther than Alexandria on the southern bank. The little port city, with its steepled churches and fine brick houses, was transformed into a sea of blue-coated soldiers. "Some say we're headed for the Carolinas," Wheeler whispered as he pocketed his fife. "Others say Florida." "I don't guess we'll be the Army of the Potomac down there," I observed. In the end, we erected our tents, drilled, and waited. We lingered there close to 2 weeks. Then Colonel Hyde addressed us the morning of March 23rd. "The rebels have taken another licking at Kernstown and the Shenandoah Valley," the colonel noted. Now it will be our turn to shatter their defenses. We are boarding ship and sailing south to the Virginia Peninsula. It's on to Richmond, boys. We stomped our feet and raised a howl, but this time we held on to our hats. Most of us remained skeptical about the new orders. Before the day was out, though, we were marching up gangways and boarding the crazy collection of inland ferries, tugs, and cargo ships that had been leased to transport the Army of the Potomac toward Richmond. I had never been to sea, and the short voyage out into Chesapeake Bay and down the Virginia coast seemed like an adventure. Some of the men had a rough time of it. The Stevens brothers, all three of them, spent most of the trip hanging over the stern rail, heaving their insides out. A good part of the regiment sailed on our ship, and Captain Harrington suggested I join the other musicians and practice the drum calls. I located Julian Scott, and he agreed to play the calls with his fife while I tapped them out on my drum. We don't really need to practice anymore, Julian told me after we went through each of the calls twice. After all those weeks of drill, I hear them in my sleep. Sure, I agreed. It's something to pass the time, though, and I think the men like to hear the music. Then they're crazy, Julian grumbled. They'll be hearing these marching calls soon enough, and it won't be to tell them we're going to line up for sick call. There's a fight brewing. We went through the calls a third time. Then Pa waved to me from the crates stacked behind the ship's foremast. Go on, Julian urged. You've drummed long enough. I grinned to him, trotted over to the crates, and sat down beside Pa. Sounds to me like you know your job, Pa observed. I hope so, I said, staring off toward the misty Virginia shore. I guess we'll be going into battle pretty soon. Could be, son, he said, pulling me closer. You know, Willie, I don't believe I've ever been as proud of you as when you walked over and joined me beside Captain Harrington in the church. I suppose it was time I made you proud of something, I said, sighing. Mostly you've had cause to wish I was somebody else's problem. Not so much, he argued. You get into mischief, I'll admit, but it's the Johnston itch to try new things and test out rules. I did it myself. I trust you'll find more success than your old fathers had. You've done fair, I told him. Not by half, he muttered. That's not what I wanted to talk to you about, though. If it's a fight that's coming, you'll find yourself on your own. I'll be off with Company B. I know there are good men around you, but they're young themselves. You can't count on them keeping you safe. You'll have to watch out for yourself. Don't worry, Pa. Captain Harrington says we drummers will be stretcher bearers when the real battle comes. And who will signal the advance? Pa asked. If that's true, why do you boys drill right beside us? I don't know, I said, scratching my ear. I guess I'll be scared some if we march along and the Rebs start shooting at us. I won't run, Pa, not if I can help myself. It's not your running that worries me, Willie. It's how tall you stood up in that church. If people start shooting, you find a rock or a tree to hide behind. Those rebel bullets won't care if you're just a boy. You understand? Yes, sir, I replied. I'll do my best to shy away from danger. I'm not saying you shouldn't do your duty, son, but the Army's got scant use for a dead drummer. And you can beat the calls as well from behind a rock as on the top of a hill. That afternoon, our ship waited its turn to enter the Hampton Roads. I thought about what Pa had said. In truth, I hadn't given much thought to a real battle. Mainly, I'd been too busy. But if a fight was coming and everybody said it was, then there would be shooting and dying. That unsettled me considerably. My spirits weren't lifted when we entered the anchorage off Fort Monroe. A sea battle had taken place there recently, and the USS Cumberland, a big sailing ship, had been sunk by the rebel ironclad Merrimac. The Cumberland's masts still stuck up above water, and a flag bravely flew from one of them. That both saddened and cheered us. I couldn't help thinking about the drowned sailors, but that defiant flag put us in a fighting mood. The sailors muttered nervously about the dreaded Merrimac, but I knew we had our own ironclad now, the Monitor. She was a little flat-decked ship with a revolving round cheesebox-like gunhouse. I spied the odd ship myself, and Captain Harrington waved his hat at it. "That's the fool thing that's going to protect us?" Cal asked as he stumbled over beside me. "I hope the good Lord's got a sense of humor. Maybe he'll look down and laugh so hard that he'll feel sorry for the Monitor." I didn't deem pity necessary. The evil-looking barrels frowning out from the Monitor's gun ports were purely inspiring. Our ship slipped past the Monitor and eased up to a landing near one of the fort's long stone walls. Sailors dashed about, tying lines and setting up gangplanks. Then our officers formed the companies. The 3rd Vermont disembarked in fine order, and once our equipment was unloaded, we passed in and out of Fort Monroe and down the peninsula toward Richmond. I didn't find Virginia very hospitable. Our first camp was in a bog, and small armies of mosquitoes and gnats descended on us. The mosquitoes nearly ate me whole. Worse, fevers plagued us so that each morning a new man or two fell out sick. We passed almost 2 weeks in the shadow of the fort, swatting insects and cursing rebels. On April 4th, we finally broke camp and marched west, toward Yorktown. The Rebs were using the old Revolutionary War trenches to hold us at bay, and the 3rd Vermont, along with the rest of General Brooks's brigade, was moving out to flank them. If we had only had to fight Rebs, I suppose we would have made short work of the campaign. Our second day on the march, the skies fell in. The wind blew sheets of rain at us, and the ground beneath us began to ooze. I had trouble walking. I would plant one foot, but when I tried to lift the other, the mud would suck my boot right off my foot. Nights were a regular nightmare. Our equipment wagons were hopelessly bogged down on what passed for a Virginia road, and so we slept in trees, in puddles, or wherever there was space. I managed to cover myself with my rubber blanket, but I was wet through anyways. I could feel mud between my toes, in my ears, stuck to my hair, and just about every other place imaginable. Our rations were miles behind, and we might have starved if Cal hadn't discovered a smokehouse full of hams. We had ourselves a regular feast, and when the owner, a fine Southern gentleman with white hair and a mustache to prove it, rode out on his horse to complain, Captain Harrington just laughed. "You brought the war upon yourself, sir," the captain insisted. "Before we have finished here, you are liable to be more inconvenienced than by the loss of a few hams." "We've smashed Grant in Tennessee," the old man barked. "Joe Johnston is coming out from Richmond soon to chase you infernal Yankees back into the sea. And when the Virginia returns, your burning fleet will light the night sky for 100 miles. I didn't understand most of that until later. Cal brought word from a headquarters cook that the Rebs had attacked Grant at a place called Shiloh in Tennessee. The Western Army had fought the Rebs to a stalemate, but the cook said 10,000 men were dead. Then, on April 11, the Merrimac, or Virginia as the Rebs had renamed her, came out from Norfolk and scattered our fleet. It seemed like all the news was discouraging. We got closer to Yorktown, but the mud and misery were wearing us down. Colonel Hyde allowed us a morning off, and a third of the regiment marched down to the James River to wash uniforms. Most of us decided to scrub ourselves, too. I confess, we were a sight. 400 men and boys, stark naked and in plain view of the neighboring houses. A couple of black women brought us cakes of soap. "You boys don't mind us," one lady said, laughing at some of the fellows' poor attempts at modesty. "We've been scrubbing white boys most all our lives." "Kind of surprised some of us, though," a second woman added. "Master Jubal said you Yankees had tails." Some white girls came by later, and I considered myself fortunate for being short. It didn't take too much water to cover most of me up. Must be hard on them, Julian told me as we swam into deeper water. Their brothers and fathers are probably in the army, and here's the enemies camped right on their doorstep. I hadn't thought about that. It saddened me some, especially when I saw a little boy about the same age as my brother Charlie. They could always free their slaves, I told Julian. Guess so, he agreed. Anyway, I think I might make some sketches of them. Just don't draw me taking a bath, I grumbled. That bath turned out to be quite an event. We were in the water maybe half an hour when we heard a loud pop from upriver. Suddenly, a big tree on the shore exploded. I heard the pop again, and a spout flew up from the water. "They're shelling us, boys!" Lieutenant Buck hollered. I glanced behind me and saw a little scow of a gunboat coming toward us. Men stood on its bow, reloading a cannon. "That's not civilized, shooting at you in the middle of a bath," Cal howled. The gunboat threw a third shell at us, though, and I joined the naked charge toward the shore. Those girls were still up there, but I didn't much care now. I didn't plan on getting myself shot to pieces. We soon had our revenge on the gunboat. The boys in Company E had brought their rifles along. They formed a skirmish line and moved out toward the shore. 2 well-aimed volleys peppered the gunboat with lead. The gunners abandoned their stations and the boat swung back toward the main channel. "Now we can get back to our washing," Cal declared. We hastily washed most of the mud out of our uniforms, but the whole time we kept a wary watch on the river. I sloshed my way back to camp in my wet uniform, as did most of the fuzzies. We hung up our clothes to dry once we were safely clear of the river. Next day, we were back in the mud, as miserable as ever.